This year Pesach is the earliest Pesach on the civil calendar since 1899. The last time Pesach fell out on March the 25th, as 25th at night, the way it does, was in 1899, which really makes things challenging because, when Pesach is late in April, so it comes March 1st, and you start to think about Pesach cleaning and so on. But this year, given that it's so early, it sort of just comes upon us, and therefore it's incumbent upon us to go that extra mile to prepare even extra. In a way, the winter was even shorter. I know in Toronto it's hard to say that, but this year for the first time ever, Tal Matar, which is symbolic of winter, Saint Tal Matar L'Bracha, has never been said only 95 days. That's it. It's the first time ever since Tal Matar began, since Shemoneh Esrei, that it's said in Chutz La'aretz so few times, again, because it's not the earliest Pesach ever, but the way the calendar works out, it's so few times, and therefore, again, with the short winter, it's important that we prepare. And in fact, when we prepare for Pesach, it's a beautiful thing. The Mesiras Nefesh of Klal Yisrael is why Pesach is such a chashuv a day, and that everybody, Ad Hayom Hazeh, until this day, Yidden know Pesach, even Yidden who unfortunately are perhaps have distanced themselves from Yiddishkeit, but Pesach is still a cornerstone, and that's a testimony to Klal Yisrael's Mesiras Nefesh because of the task of preparing. Doiris never forgot the Elder Abba cleaning and baking and cooking for Pesach, and therefore the work and the effort that we put in not only lasts for this Pesach, but it lasts for our children, for our grandchildren, and for Doiris. And in fact, if we could tie in, we're so close to Purim, we start with a bar for Purim where Esther uses the terminology of Ladas Mazeh Al Mazeh. Esther says this terminology, the Lashon of Zed, what's going on with Klal Yisrael? Why are we chayiv? What do we do wrong over here? What's the problem? So the Gemara Darshans, the problem was from the Lashon of Zed, Keli V'Anveyu, the term Zed, this is a reference to they weren't keeping the pasuk of Zed Keli V'Anveyu. What do we learn from Zed Keli V'Anveyu? That's a pasuk in by the Shira. So we learn out from there the Indian of Heber mitzvah, to be mahaded, to beautify the mitzvah. And therefore, Esther was saying, we are not beautifying the mitzvah, we're not enhancing the mitzvah enough. And therefore, this terrible thing is happening to Klal Yisrael. So we see from here that when Klal Yisrael beautify the mitzvah, whether it's Baruchnius or Begashmius, whether we spend money on the mitzvahs that we keep, or whether we prepare, we're making, we know the halacha properly, we make the time to prepare in the proper way, that's the greatest Heber mitzvah, and that's ultimately the salvation and the hatzlacha of Klal Yisrael. Perhaps no coincidence in the smichas, there's many connections between Purim and Pesach. It's no coincidence that the greatest Heber mitzvah that we have are Yom Tovim, and therefore we have this tremendous connection. What I'd like to cover this evening in the Hakana for Pesach is some of the basics, understanding some of the behind-the-scenes issues that go on, what's new this year, and things perhaps that you might miss in your Pesach preparation. So first, of course, if you're going to kasher, some of the basics, the different levels of kashering, just to highlight them, we have, of course, the rule of Kabbalah Kapoltai, which means the same way something not kosher goes in, that's the same way that it goes out. And therefore, if you have a pot, of course, with water in it, you have to boil it out. You wait for it to become a native ben yoyim, make sure it sits for 24 hours. You put it in another pot, you put it in a Pesach pot, you kasher it, that ensures that any time, any taste of chametz goes out and becomes pogum. But again, it's important that it's an native ben yoyim. An oven, you do a libud kal. The oven, of course, a libud kal is done. If you have self-cleaning, matayu manoim, that's great. If you don't have self-cleaning, you want to put it on broil for 550 for 40 minutes, or whatever exact number that your Rav says. Just an eitzah taiva. If you don't have an oven which is self-cleaning, the racks that are very hard to clean with easy off, it's very difficult. So very simply, take the racks out and bring it to your neighbor who has self-cleaning, and say, do me a favor, can you put the self-clean cycle so that you do me a favor, at least my racks can be kasher with self-clean, and then the rest of the oven is not so bad. You climb in the oven a little bit, you have a little elbow grease, you clean up, and sure, you have a kosher Pesach oven when you set it in the proper way. Things like barbecue grills are very complicated. They need a little gummer, it has to get red hot. Typically, that's something that is very difficult. It should be in consultation with your Rav. Mechiras chametz, of course, don't forget Mechiras chametz, and there's a lot of fascinating behind the scenes things that go on. But one important point is if you're going away for Pesach, make sure you tell your Rav that you're going away, because it depends on which time zone you're going to go to. If you're going to Eretz Yisrael, then the chametz is a shayla and halacha, whether we go by the person or do we go where the chametz is. So if I go to Eretz Yisrael, let's say, and then it's the Rav is selling the chametz at 9 o'clock in the morning. For me, it's already 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's already this man. So there's a shayla in the place. How do you go? So we're machmir both ways. And we say when Pesach begins, we want to make sure you don't own it, whether your chametz is there, whether you're there. And therefore, the Rav typically sells the chametz the night before. So if you tell him you'll be in Eretz Yisrael, you'll be in Europe, you'll be in Australia, then he sells it the night before, and therefore that solves the problem. So it's important you note that. When Pesach ends, so let's say you're in California, someone asked me already, they're selling the chametz, they said they're going to be in Cleveland for Pesach. Is there a problem? Because it's 40 minutes later this month. That's certainly not a problem. By the time you get to the chametz, it's already over, for sure. But what about people in California? It's just an interesting tidbit that Rabbanim know, but it's fascinating for Balbatim to appreciate the mechanics and techniques. I know of 2 ways that are done how to deal with the Motzei Yontif issue of people who are in California. One way is simply the Rav said, listen, I'm buying back the chametz, but if someone is in California, then we don't want to buy it back until it's dark by then. So whatever, midnight our time will be 9 o'clock California, Pesach will be over. So the guy says, okay, no problem. The other way, very interesting, my Rebbe Koletsky, that's all, this is the method Rabbi Heinemann uses, is what he does is he calls the guy right after Yontif and says, listen, we want to buy chametz back. Are you willing to sell it? He says, yeah, I'm willing to sell it. He says, okay, great. Let's meet tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock in your office. Okay, great. He says, you're selling it back to us anyway. So do you mind if we use it already tonight? So the guy says, yeah, no problem. You're going to buy it anyway tomorrow. So no problem. So therefore we don't actually own it, but Lamaisa, it's there for the people in California who don't have a problem, but you're still able to use it. What's interesting, when I mentioned this afternoon, this is a story worth repeating, is that once Rabbi Heinemann once told me the story, the Rabbi Makshir of the Star K, where he once had to come on to a new guy to sell the chametz to. For certain reasons, the other one was unable to do it. He was a policeman, and he was afraid that maybe we'd get into trouble because he's buying millions of dollars of chametz. The police may do some investigation, so he decided he doesn't want to do it anymore. So he finds someone reputable in town, and he sat him down. He says, you're Jewish. No, I'm not Jewish. My mother was Jewish. Your grandmother, your elder brother, right? Nobody's Jewish. So he says, okay. He said, I do have Jewish relatives. He says, who? He says, my children. Your children? He says, my wife is Jewish. So he says, your wife is Jewish. So he says, okay, that's no problem. I'm selling you my chametz. I'm not selling your wife. Okay, great. Anyway, in the middle of Pesach, he says, oh no, what happens if this Gentile passes away on Pesach? So the tens of millions of dollars of chametz from Sarkin companies is going to go to the Yarshim. Okay, so who the Yarshim? The children. This is dangerous. So I said, Rabbi Heinemann said, what'd you do? He says, I davened that he should live through Pesach. Lamaisa, he still does it. So he does a shtar that says any chametz that comes through Rabbi Heinemann will go to your mother. Your children won't yarshin. They have chametz. On the topic of traveling, if you are traveling, this shayla comes up very often. You can really sell your whole house if you want. Meaning you sell all the chametz in your house, you rent the space where it is. But people don't want to lose out on the mitzvah because chametz. So there's an old minig, an old custom that what you do is you pick one room, and that one room you keep. I'm not selling this. This room I'm not selling. I'm selling my entire house except for one room. And that room you do a bedika on. If the bedika is done anytime before the night before Erev Pesach, which would mean before the Sunday night before Pesach, then you don't make a bracha. If you do bedika on Sunday night, then you do, maybe if you're doing Sunday night with a bracha, maybe 2 rooms Of course, you have the right to pick the easiest room. Maybe it's a second bedroom. You're not mechuyev to pick the room which is the most difficult, and then you're mekayim the mitzvah of b'tikas chametz. And finally, on the topic of traveling, it's important to know that where you're traveling may have issues. For example, I know some people are going to Hawaii this year for Pesach. Now, Hawaii is a tricky place to go for Pesach. See, Hawaii has a shiloh. We're the international date line. This is an old favorite topic of mine. I'm not going to spend the rest of the year on this topic, but L'maisa is a shiloh. Where is the date line? Where is the international date line? And this is there are different opinions, and some of the great opinions of Rabbi and other great rabbanim after Rabbi Chamichal held that the international date line is really between Hawaii and the civil date line, which would mean between Hawaii and New Zealand, between Hawaii and Japan. Otherwise, it's a big shiloh. Therefore, many places can say that in Hawaii, when they say it's Friday, it's really Shabbos because you're on the other side of the date line. In other words, in Hawaii right now, it's not 2 o'clock Tuesday afternoon; it's 2 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, according to that. So when it's Thursday night, it's really Shabbos, according to many places in Hawaii. So this year is a really tricky year to go to Hawaii because if you're going to keep every Erev, you're going to have 7 days of Yom Tov for Pesach. Because Mondays are Pesach, but maybe it's already Yom Tov. So it's Pesach, you can't do many holes, you won't be able to do chametz. You shouldn't do malacha teiraises on that day. Don't do Torah prohibitions. So Monday is Yom Tov, and Tuesday and Wednesday are Yom Tov. Thursday is the final day you can run around a little bit. And Friday is again Suffolk Shabbos. So you got another day of Shabbos. Then comes Shabbos, then comes Sundays, Erev Yom Tov again. And then it's Monday, Tuesday, so really you can end up having 7 days of Pesach, which is 23 hours of Holomoid. In between, if you're planning on going to Hawaii, ask your local Rav exactly how to deal with the situation. Or just enjoy the Yom Tov of Pesach. Now, Erev Pesach is sometimes a day which the halachas is sometimes not so well known. From Chatzos and on, as is known from the Psukim of Chumash, the Korban Pesach was brought, and therefore there are certain malachas which are prohibited from Chatzos and on Erev Pesach. It's similar to Chol Hamoed, very, very similar to Chol Hamoed. It's almost not exactly identical, but there are many similarities between Erev Pesach after Chatzos and Chol Hamoed. So for example, just like Chol Hamoed, one can't take a haircut. On Erev Pesach after Chatzos, one cannot take a haircut. This is an issue maybe by a guy, by a Gentile. There was more Haterim, was Chol Hamoed. You can't do it Erev Pesach after Chatzos. We're more lenient to ask a guy. But again, if one is doing that, ideally that should be done really before Chatzos, including nails and so on. Ideally should be done. Also, even laundry, right? And that's laundry is a big asik. After you finish cleaning for Pesach, and you're all ready, and you cooked, and you have everything ready, you realize that you need 9 days of laundry because there's no laundry Chol Hamoed, with the exception, of course, of for a child or maybe someone elderly that is unable to remain clean properly. But other than that, it's an issur Chol Hamoed. So one really should have all of that ready by Chatzos, as far as having it all ready for Pesach at time, so that you have enough clothing for the Yom Tov and for Chol Hamoed. Let's talk a little bit about products for Pesach. There are many items that don't require a hechsher for Pesach, and that's important just to know. Sometimes it's what's available, maybe even for economical reasons. You could say cocoa, 100% pure, which is North American cocoa produced, doesn't need a hechsher. Fresh meat, poultry, except for maybe raw hamburgers that have certain additives, don't need a hechsher for Pesach. So if for example, you bought a chicken or you bought meat. Hanukkah time, there was a sale, and you had it in your freezer, and it was sitting there. So some people say, I was in my freezer with chametz and so on. Well, nice if it was wrapped properly, and especially if it was in plastic, it didn't matter if it was in the freezer. You rinse it off. You rinse out the outside, certainly with water, because plastic, and you can use it. There's nothing wrong with using that because raw meat does not have this problem. Again, processed meat has additives and so on. We're not talking about hot dogs processed. Talking about simply the raw chickens, raw meat, and so on. Salt, non-iodized, without dextrose or polysorbates, is okay without a hechsher or Pesach, even if it has sodium silicate. Sodium silicate is an ingredient that is intrinsically kosher for Pesach. Sugar, the cane sugar or beet sugar, without dextrose, does not need a hechsher for Pesach. However, brown sugar and vanilla and other sugar substitutes, confectionery sugar, those require a hefsher for Pesach. Particular sugar substitutes certainly are very often have kitnius additives. Very often the substitute itself is not necessarily a problem, but a lot of them have fillers, which are corn-based and are straightaway kitnius, and therefore certainly the ones that are made for Pesach especially are made without these types of additives. Frozen fruit, which is additive-free, without citric acid, ascorbic acid, no syrup, and so on, is okay. Again, if there's a talam issue, if there's an infestation issue, then one has to make sure it has a hefsher to avoid that. But putting the talam issue aside, as far as straightaway Pesach, there's no problem. Eggs, of course, don't need a hefsher for Pesach. The minhag is to buy eggs prior to Pesach, or at least eggs that were laid before Pesach. So, for example, if you forgot to buy enough eggs the first day Cholamoid, you realize you need more eggs for the last days, you had more guests than you thought. So again, if you go to the store and you see the dated, you can look and you see at the front of the refrigerator case are the older date ones, and the back is the newer date. You're able to cheshbon, you can calculate that these are from before Pesach. Then certainly not a problem. Unflavored seltzer, water, even with minerals added, are not a problem. But flavors, of course, are something that need a hefsher, and certainly need a hefsher for Pesach. Now there's some new products that I'd briefly like to talk about. Quinoa. Quinoa is, this year, the Star K actually made a quinoa with a Star K Pesach hefsher. And that's Ancient Harvest, and Natural Earth products are products that actually they have on them a Star KP on them, and they were done with mashkiach that was there in the fields in South America to make sure there's no issues. Some issues with quinoa came up where they grow, and so on. All of this was not a problem, and they're okay. Actually, the agave, as a side note, the bracha on quinoa is a hadama. Of course, if you ground the quinoa and made something out of it, it becomes shahakal. But quinoa in and of itself, the bracha is a bar piyadama, as so to speak, a vegetable that grows from the ground. Now, this year also, and this is in conjunction with the Star K. I just want to mention this Nakuda, and that is there's a hefsher now known as the Star S. And the Star S, the Rabbi Machshir, is Rabbi Emmanuel Goldfez, who was a Rabbi in Baltimore. And the Star S is for Sfardim. It's a particular for Sfardim, and it really covers 4 issues. We'll say, I guess, to explain it, one is a kula, and 3 are a chumrah, meaning Sfardim have certain leniencies, and they have certain chumras, they have certain stringencies. And I like to just briefly mention them. It's just Ashkenazim, it's kedai to hear exactly some of these inyanim. It's important. Actually, on a historical note, the Ramah, who wrote the glossy to the Shulchan Aruch, did the greatest thing by writing them on the Shulchan Aruch. So therefore, we have Playtime, one Shulchan Aruch. The Sfardim know what the Ashkenazim hold through the Ramah. The Ashkenazim know what the Sfardim hold through the Mechaber. Shalom al Yisrael. There is the Star S with a P has the kidneys for other kidneys for those Sfardim who eat kidneys. But in previous years, those products, and this I should mention, is not only relevant to Sfardim. Someone who's ill or babies are allowed to have a baby cereal. Now, baby cereals you can't get. I'm talking about not there's the baby jars. There are 2 brands on the market that are kosher with Pesach. But as far as cereal is concerned, those are made in chametz facilities. I'm talking about the powders now. They're made on chametz lines. You can't buy a rice cereal and give it to a baby because they're made on chametz lines and there's chametz all over the plant and they don't clean the equipment and so on. So you could make a rice cereal for a baby, but you need kosher Pesach rice. Namely, you need chametz-free rice. So this is not only relevant to Sfardim, but even babies would have a need for it and so on. So in previous years there was discussion of the additives, and are the additives okay? And there's a lot of complicated additives, Pesach complicated, in these types of rice and so on. What the Star S did was research those, very, very carefully. Someone just showed me on one of the Sfardim websites where in previous years they made lists of rice that they had determined through research was okay. They said, we don't need to do that anymore because it's available with this, with this hefsher on it. That's chametz free, and the research more than just the regular research, but rather an in-depth research of all the ingredients to ensure that the chametz free was done, and therefore that's available to Sfardim. As a side note, the 3 chumras, the common chumras of Sfardim is probably, I would say, first and foremost, but first is there's a fundamental difference in the halachas of bishul akum between the Sfardi and Ashkenazim. This is important to know because it's been very, very difficult for Sephardim, even in yeshivas and in camps and in restaurants. And that is the Ashkenazi opinion is that when you cook, we know there's a concept, if there's a guy that's cooking, there's a concept of hashlochas kisa, which means if the yid assists in the cooking process, there's no bishul akum problem. Something which is fit for a king's table that you serve at a chasana, and it's ein anachal k'meshu chai, which means it's not eaten in its raw state, like meat and like chicken and so on, is a problem of bishul akum. If a Gentile cooks it, it's a problem. So by Ashkenazim, we know that if long as you turn on the flame, it's good enough. And therefore, in restaurants, the mashgiach turns on the flame. The chef knows that if the flame goes out, you got to call a mashgiach, right? And you got to get the mashgiach from the other room, whatever it is. But according to Sephardim, that's not enough. Hashlochas kisim is not enough. So technically, according to Sephardim, a lot of the most kosher restaurants, Ashkenazim, is not kosher lefi shitas Sephardim. And this has been, as the Sephardic community, Baruch Hashem, has grown in North America, over the last 40 years, this has been a big issue with Bachrim and yeshivas. The yeshivas, again, they're catering primarily, and 99% Ashkenazim, 5% Sephardim have a problem. There's Chuvas, Rabbi Yosef, and others have written extensive Chuvas about this, what do they do? How do they eat? So the star S is going to be makbid on bishul akum issues, lefi the shitas Sephardim. Hashlochas kisim is not going to be enough. It's going to have the real, the tuna fish run, and so on, where it was done according to Sephardim. And finally, the meat is halak beit yosef, which meets the Sephardic standards, and also the star S will be only yoshan, which Sephardim are naive, across the board. And also on the topic of the kidneys, I'd like to mention that a few points to get a little bit into the medicine. But of course, not only is a child allowed to eat kidneys, which is relevant to the baby formulas, which are all kidneys, but also a elderly person. You have your insures and your boost, which are listed on the lists, are allowed to eat kidneys, and a chayla, someone who's ill, is allowed to eat kidneys. So the list, the Starkey publishes a list. It's in really conjunction with Rabbi Best. That list is available for sale. It really relates to pharmaceuticals sold in the United States. Things are a little bit different here, per se. But you have pharmaceutical items are, of course, over-the-counter drugs, prescription drugs, and you have also nutraceuticals. The nutraceuticals, of course, are nutritional supplements and the like. The list, what it does, a list per se, one person has to know off the bat that someone who's a chayil l'sheish b'sakana is allowed to take anything. Now, when we hear the word chayil l'sheish b'sakana, we think of someone whose life is in danger, someone has a heart attack, that of course is a chayil l'sheish b'sakana. They could have anything. But it's more than that. It's people who are on medications that, if they don't take them, could become life-threatening. Blood pressure and antidepressants and so on. And even if a person has a condition, and this was something a doctor noted this, there are various conditions that people have, and that as they start playing around with medicines, it can mess things up. And therefore, if a person has a regular colitis and other conditions, which if they get off of that, they have exactly how it's done, and they get off that medicine, then they're going to run into problems, and therefore they can continue. If the doctor tells them they can switch, then fine. But if they can't get the doctor, they can't find out for sure, then certainly one should continue taking the medication in such a case. Now, but on the other hand, so that's if someone's a chayil sheish b'sakana, someone's a chayil she'ein b'sakana is allowed to swallow a pill, meikar adin. Nonetheless, the purpose of lists is there are people who are makbid by Pesach. Again, it's part of the chumrah of Pesach. And just as a historical note, this is not something new. These lists, we found, someone found a list that was 80 years old from Germany, where they had lists of ingredients, and it was fascinating to read. This is okay, this is not okay. Ingredients for aspirin that were shown. It was fascinating to see. These were lists that were like, I think it was 1928, if I'm not mistaken, this list. And it was amazing to see that, today, 85 years later, we're carbon copying things that were done already, almost 100 years ago, if not more. So again, that's a chayil she'ein b'sakana. What a person has to know, though, is that if a person is just taking something, certainly if it tastes good, and it has kidneys in it, one really has to question whether or not they really need it. For example, let's say a multivitamin. Like, unless a person has a problem, a multivitamin, what's the necessarily the necessity? Or someone has a little bit of indigestion. So, for example, a product like Tums, which many of them are on the list, and we try to write kidneys by those items that cater to people who only have what's called a mechush. A mechush is a discomfort. So if someone just has a mechush, so then one has to really seriously ask themselves, do I have to take kidneys? I'm not really a chayla, I have a little bit of indigestion, but do I really need to take this medication? As a side note, there are several days of Pesach that if a person has a mechush, they can't take medicine altogether. On the first day of Yom Tov and on Shabbos, if a person is a chayla, she'ein b'sakana or yesh b'sakana, that means their life is not in danger or is in danger, they can take any medication they need. If a person just has a mechush, you're not allowed to take medicine on Shabbos or on the first day of Yom Tov. So if after the Seder you have indigestion, you got to ask yourself two questions. First of all, is this a kosher Pesach product totally? If it's only kidneys, do I really need it? Or not? How ill? I'm not really that ill. And B is if after the first Seder, so then it's first day Yom Tov, only if you're a chayla you can take medication. But if it's the second night of Pesach, by then already, maybe you need it a little more even. So then the halacha is on the second night of Yom Tov, the second day of Yom Tov, the halacha is it's mutter. But I want to reiterate that it's important to read, I call it disclaimer, so to speak, of who is allowed to take medication regardless of the situation. And then again, we're talking about kidneys. There are products that are outright chametz gomer. Benefiber, for example, is made from a wheat texture. It says it right there on the label. It's the one that's sold in the United States. That's chametz gomer. If a person mixed that in there and took it, it's chametz gomer. So again, one should be careful, but not. There's a balance. There's a delicate balance here. It's Pesach, but on the other hand, if a person's ill, they have to know what they're allowed to do, and certainly one should be in touch with their Morda'as or with their Rav, and of course with the COR, who are always happy to answer your questions. Now, other little tips. Very often, traps that or if a person has baits that are out. Many baits are chametz. In particular, the nice baits that are out are chametz. So people put them. You'll have someone who puts them out, and again, they can be chametz right there. And we don't say, of course, they're not royal achila. They are not royal achila, right? But they're not fit for consumption. But really, what's happening there is you have this poison bait. You have the bait, which is very often an oat mixture. There's a exterminator in Baltimore. He has his Pesach brew, right, that he starts to put out around Purim time, for the little critters. L'maisa, though, the ones that are used during the course of the year have oats in them. That's part of the bait. It's a peanut butter. You want the peanut butter one? It's only kidneys. There's no problem with mice and kidneys. Not a problem. But the oat bait is a problem. And again, we don't say it's not royal achila because ultimately there's poison, but the poison is really external to the oats. The oats are still royal achila. It's not something you would eat because of the poison. So one should note that before Pesach you want to put them away, sell them with the chametz, or check with your exterminator to see exactly what the story is. The sprays are not a problem though. In other words, the insecticides and so on are not a problem. These companies are very secretive. I should mention in our research, the finding out what's in the commercial base are very difficult. Companies are tight. What's the bait in there? What's in there? It's proprietary. We can't tell you. I guess if it's sent to a lab, I guess somehow you can probably figure out which ones are okay. On the topic of animals, so of course pet food. This is a common knowledge, but we'll just repeat it, and with an extra note for this year, and that is that pet food certainly needs a hechsher for. I said that wrong. Certainly, pet food has to be on a Pesach list as being chametz free because there's two issues with pet foods. Number one is a chametz issue. Number two is a basal chalav issue. Many pet foods are milk and meat. Milk and meat is asav hana, and it's always hard to explain the pet store. Exactly like your dog has to keep Pesach food. Fido is makbid on. He's makbid on kidneys too. Right? But l'maisa, all kidding aside, fish foods and there are lists that are there are very often fish foods and gerbils and dogs and cats and so on, they very often, again, Bas Machal is a year-round problem because it's called I'm getting hana, right? I'm getting pleasure. It's also to have hana it's also to have pleasure from comments on Pesach, and therefore there's another Bali Matzah problem. I own it, and therefore this really causes serious problems for pet owners, and one should be extra cautious. Comments again on Pesach would be this issue, and one has to be careful on Pesach, and you have to check every year. The science diet foods were previous years were okay, and they changed the formulations. So even if last year your pet food was okay, you want to check the ingredients. You want to make sure that it's properly on the list. Another tip is that, of course, egg matzah is matzah shira is only permissible for someone who's a chayla. There are certain egg matzah products out there that are called egg matzah, so you want to be careful that if it's using something called chocolate matzah, I don't know if it's still on the market. But again, those are egg matzah product. It's only permissible only if someone is a chayla. Now, a little seder tip. Every year you open up the box of matzahs. If you use hand matzahs, and there's a little crack, there's a little snip on the edge of the matzah. So if you have 30 pounds of matzahs, then okay, you go to the next box. Some people buy hand matzah only for the seder. They bought their 2 or 3 pounds. In particular, those who buy oat matzahs, they buy 1 pound. They're very expensive. There's, they should be yaitz in the mitzvah. People who have, allergies and so on. If your matzah is cracked a little bit, then it could be used for lechem mishnah, 1 of 3 matzahs. You have up to 1/48 of the matzah, which I guess in simple math would be 2%. If you're missing 2% of the matzah that's been chipped off, it's still kosher for lechem mishnah. Right? It's not a problem. If it's once you hit a little more than 2%, it's 2 point whatever the math is, but it's hard to measure exactly. So that's your cutoff. I've had this very often where there's a little snip, and it's very easy. Picture how big is the part of my matzah missing, and then see if you can fill up 50 spots on your matzah, then you're okay. In other words, with that size, if you could, you say, oh yeah, there's such a little snip off, and I could put 100 of that out there. Measuring sure, I always like to tell over the story, where once there was a caterer in Baltimore called me up, and there was a simcha right near my shul, and maybe there was a member, they were going eating in a bigger hall, and he called me up and he said, it was half hour before Shabbos, he said, you have to stop by. Something happened. On the way, we had a loaf of gefilte fish in the truck, and it slipped out into the chicken soup. Of course, fish and chicken is a problem. So we have to figure out if it's bottle or not. So there's a whole bunch of bittul and say, it said, why is it bottle? I even called the fish person who I know, an old friend of mine. I want to find out how much filler do you put in that fish, right? Because it's very important. It's 100% fish that we're finished, right? There's no way you can have shishim in a pot of soup against a whole loaf of fish. But 50% filled, 60% filled, Baruch Hashem. So now we have only, we need 30%. So I remember I have to have invited as a guest coming over that night. We went to the shul. I went through the back. Of course, if I go through the front, what way here? I'm just checking on your chicken soup. Make sure it's no. It's proprietary information. We went through the back. Okay, I was familiar with the shul. We went through the back. I told him, you wait here. The caterer told the guard, right, one of his waiters, you wait by the door. No one's allowed in. Right? No one come in right now. I'm sitting there measuring how big. Is it big enough? It's under pressure. It's very hard. I like numbers. It's under pressure. It's very hard to make a tremendous. In the end, we found that there was shisha. So Baruch Hashem, the soup was served. But on Monday or the following week, I met the mashgiach. I said, boy, that was wow. It was that's it. He says, you didn't hear the end of the story. The end of the story is when they started scooping out the filter fish, they found the potato kugel at the bottom. Baruch Hashem, there were no silence with the potato kugel. But it was definitely there. I just want to finish up. By the Seder, of course, if you have to dilute wine or grape juice, people who are diabetic or people that have other concerns, again, you'll ask your percentage. If you want to drink wine, then 4% alcohol. Remember, Heinemann, you can ask the local place from here. I'm sure it's a number around that number. That's considered wine. And if you want to drink grape juice, typically, and if you could water down wine, so you have 4% alcohol left by the time you're done diluting, and then you have the shame wine. If you have grape juice and it's difficult, all that sugar, like just had the Shiloh yesterday, then you could dilute it typically 50-50 is okay to dilute. So that certainly waters it down. Not if it's light. You know, if it's light, it's already down. If regular grape juice, 50-50 is enough. So just think about it. A revius is 4 ounces. You need a kais, it's a revius. You want to drink a rye revius, which is a majority, ideally rye kais even, but that's, rye revius is enough if someone's ill, certainly. So rye with a kais is really going to be 2.1 ounces, let's say. So if you have a diluted 50-50 grape juice, you know, by the end of the night, you've only drank 4 ounces of grape juice. That's not, that's not so much. People get very nervous about it. Well, so if you do it right, and it's advisable, prepare the brew before Pesach, right? Take a bottle, put in half grape juice, half water, and now you have your bottle, and pour from that. You don't have to start mixing by the Seder, and then pour it in, and you have your kais, 4 ounces or whatever, and then you're able to to drink, and you drink a little more than half of that, and you be nice to the mitzvah dalal kaisis in the proper manner, kitikuna. Of course, on Yom Tov, we have special davening, which has many halachas, and just a chazan, this is very important halacha because people get mixed up. If you finish benching, you finish Birkas Hamazon, and you realize you didn't say Alav Yavai, there's a simple rule. If it's a sunnah that you're obligated to eat, then you have to repeat benching. Again, we're talking about where you went into the next bracha, wait till native London. If you remember before that, if you're in Ubaneh, you could say it then. If you're between brachas, there's a special bracha that was Besukah, it's in the Arsenal Siddur and other Siddur. If you went further, you finished, so you have to go over again. If it's a sunnah that you're obligated to eat, then you have to bench over again. So Friday night, Shabbos morning. If it's a sunnah that you're not obligated according to all opinions, then you don't have to bench over again. Or if you're not obligated according to anybody. So Rosh Chodesh, you don't have to bench over again if you miss Yal B'Yavai, because you're not obligated to the sunnah. It's nice to eat the sunnah. You don't have to bench over again. That's different than davening. Davening, if you miss Yal B'Yavai by Chakras of Mincha, you have to go back. Cholamoid, if you miss by Marav Chakras of Mincha, you have to daven over again. So the halachas get confusing a little bit, but by Birkas Hamazon, so it comes out Yom Tov, the first night or the second night, you have to bench over again. Everybody has to bench over again. The other meals of Yom Tov, so the men would have to bench over again. Kiveger has a shiloh whether the chiv of women is sunnah and so on. So a woman who forgot Yal B'Yavai would not have to bench over. So the chazer, men have to bench over Shabbos and Yom Tov by the first 2 sunnahs. Women have to bench over by Shabbos, first 2 sunnahs, and the first 2 nights of Pesach, if they miss. Otherwise, if they miss Yal B'Yavai, they don't have to bench over again. And of course, be careful in the Shemana Esrei on Motzei Yom Tov. Right? That's, I think, one of the trickiest Shemanesses of the year. You have Atcharantanu. If you miss it, you have to go back and say Bracha, which you switch to, and you have Yal B'Yavai. It's, you have to help up, and the next morning, Cholamoid, it's tricky, and again, it's a good, say 90 times, you condition yourself to say it properly, then, if you're not sure, the halacha is, one doesn't have to go back. On the topic of the same Bracha, and I'll just end with a couple little tidbits, and that is the rare Shemana Esrei. The rare Shemana Esrei is with the same bracha. Mr. Shem, we should be zeichet to come together when that happens. The rare Shemana Esrei, I don't do a Pesach, but I just have to throw it in. Talk about the same bracha is when Motzei Shabbos is Pesach. Motzei Shabbos is Chanukah and Rosh Chodesh, and it's before December 4th, so you're still saying the same bracha, right? So you have a very, very early Chanukah, like this year. This year Chanukah is in Canada, it's hard to say it. And in the States, it's the Hanukkah's Thanksgiving. It's the United States Thanksgiving. But it's very early. If we'd have a Motzei Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, this year Rosh Chodesh is not Motzei Shabbos. It happened in 1899. It happened in 1994. It won't happen until 2089. Such as Shemana Esrei. It's a Shem. We should be zeichet. But things that'll happen sooner, and maybe we'll come back and shmooze about this, is Erev Pesach Shabbos B'Shabbos. Right? The COR is, Baruch Hashem, 60 years old. They've done wonderful work for the community. But initially they had minimal experience with Erev Pesach B'Shabbos because it happened in 1954, and then it didn't happen for 20 years, till 1974. So I guess when it happened, they had to sit with their price. And it'll happen again in 2021, and then again in 2025, and then it won't happen for 20 years again, till 2045. So it's a Shem. We should be zeichet to come together. And finally, of course, in 24 years, B'ez Hashem, Birkas Hachama, which is already 4 years ago. We said Birkas Hachama, B'ez Hashem. We said Birkas Hachama, Isru Chag, in the year 2037, which is 24 years, well, we should be to come together. Thank you very much.